"You look like you've never carried a tray in your life," one of the senior waitresses sneered as Clara stepped through the swinging kitchen doors that led to the rooftop dining floor. Her words sliced through the air as sharply as the sunlight that poured over the glass ceiling of the Manhattan restaurant. Clara kept her head down, clutching the edge of her tray with both hands, but the laughter that followed stung worse than the remark itself. It was her first morning on the job, and though she had rehearsed every step of what she thought a fine dining waitress was supposed to do, reality was different. The women around her moved like practiced dancers, fluid in their rhythm of carrying plates, whispering orders, balancing wine bottles with an elegance she couldn't yet copy. Clara's uniform fit a little too snug across her shoulders, the black apron strings cutting into her waist, and the soles of her shoes already ached even though the day had barely begun. "Careful not to trip," another server added under her breath, her smirk curling as she brushed past Clara to deliver champagne flutes to a waiting table of executives. Clara forced herself to breathe slowly, remembering her father's words from weeks ago in that dim hospital room. He had held her hand with his frail fingers, his voice rasping but steady. "Don't quit on life, Clara. Just keep steady, like you always do." She was here because she had no choice. Once, she had dreamed of finishing her degree in early childhood education, working in a classroom surrounded by children's drawings and laughter. But after her father's stroke, the medical bills had swallowed every spare dollar. Her younger brother was still in high school and depended on her. Clara had traded her textbooks for this job, taken not out of passion but necessity, in a restaurant that catered to millionaires who treated waitstaff like background noise. The rooftop gleamed with polished marble floors and glass railings that opened to a sweeping view of New York's skyline. Guests lounged beneath cream-colored umbrellas, sipping mimosas as if the city were their private stage. Clara forced her steps to match the calm grace she had observed in the others, but inside, her stomach was a tight knot. Manager Colton appeared from behind the bar, his sharp eyes already trained on her like a hawk spotting prey. "First day," he muttered in a voice that managed to sound both disinterested and condescending. He straightened his tie, eyeing her posture with disdain. "Don't think this is some cafe. Our guests are millionaires. Don't embarrass me." His words carried enough venom to silence the clinking glasses around him. Clara nodded quickly, biting back the urge to explain herself. She wanted to tell him she was a hard worker, that she learned quickly, that she wasn't just some wide-eyed novice. But her throat tightened, and all that came out was a whispered, "Yes, sir." He turned away, already dismissing her, and she felt the burn of humiliation creep across her cheeks. She adjusted her apron and inhaled deeply, whispering to herself like a mantra, "Stay steady. Just stay steady." But steadiness was hard to find in the next few minutes. The gossip started again in the prep area while she tried to memorize the table numbers. Two senior waitresses leaned close together, pretending to check silverware but clearly directing their words toward Clara. "She looks nervous. Probably from some cheap diner." "No, look at her hands," the other said, smirking as Clara set water glasses on a tray. "She looks like she's never worked before. Bet she drops a plate before noon." Clara swallowed hard and adjusted her grip, forcing herself not to flinch. She had endured worse. She had endured late nights at the hospital, the endless phone calls from billing departments, the weight of being 28 years old and already feeling like life had cornered her. A few cruel whispers wouldn't break her. Still, they lodged like tiny shards under her skin. When she finally stepped onto the main floor with her tray balanced carefully, the first customers she served didn't make it easier. A group of well-dressed women in pastel dresses studied their menus with the air of judges at a performance. Clara cleared her throat softly, reciting the specials she had memorized, but when she reached the name of a French seafood dish, her tongue tangled, and she mispronounced it. The women's laughter rang out, sharp and unkind. "Adorable," one of them said, dabbing the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "Maybe she should stick to burgers and fries." Clara felt her face flush, but she forced herself to smile and note their orders without faltering. The laughter didn't stop until she walked away, and even then she could feel it trailing her like smoke. Colton's hand clamped on her arm as soon as she passed by the bar. His voice was a low hiss. "If you want to last the week, fix your posture and stop stuttering. Our guests notice everything." One mistake and you're out. Yes, sir, she whispered again, her throat tight. As she carried the tray toward the kitchen, a busboy stumbled while trying to lift a tower of dishes. Clara quickly set down her tray and steadied the stack with both hands, helping him carry it through the door. He mumbled a shy thank you, but no one else noticed her small kindness. At least, not anyone she thought would. In the far corner of the rooftop, a man had been watching quietly. Ethan Ward, though Clara didn't yet know his name, sat at a solitary table with a view of the skyline behind him. Billionaire, philanthropist, and a man used to seeing people at their most polished and their most false, he saw something different in the young woman struggling through her first day. She wasn't flawless. She wasn't glamorous. But there was an honesty in the way she steadied that busboy without seeking credit, in the way she absorbed humiliation without striking back. Ethan's gaze lingered a little longer than most would have. The cruelty, however, wasn't finished. A man in an expensive suit deliberately dropped his fork on the floor just as Clara passed by. When she turned, startled, he looked up at her with a smirk. "Pick it up, sweetheart. That's what you're here for." The table erupted in chuckles as Clara bent gracefully, retrieved the fork, and replaced it with a polished one. Inside, her dignity screamed, but she refused to let it show. She simply nodded, lips pressed tight, and walked on. In the back, she leaned against the counter for just a breath, pressing her palms hard into the steel surface until her pulse slowed. Another waitress passed by, muttering under her breath just loud enough to be heard. "She's trying too hard. Watch, she'll crack under pressure." Clara whispered to herself, almost soundlessly, "Stay steady. Just like Dad said." She forced her shoulders back and picked up another tray. It was when she returned to the floor to refill water glasses that Ethan finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost casual, yet it carried weight. "Tough morning?" Clara glanced at him in surprise. For a moment she thought he was mocking her too, but his expression was calm, even kind. She forced a small smile. "I'll manage." Ethan studied her for a moment longer, and though she couldn't tell what he was thinking, she felt as if he saw through the uniform, through the shaky confidence, to the exhaustion beneath. The spell broke when Colton appeared again, dragging Clara toward the side of the bar after a customer murmured about a slow drink refill. His voice was sharp, cutting across the room. "You're not cut out for this. Next mistake is your last." Clara nodded, gripping her tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. She felt the weight of every eye on her, even those who pretended not to notice. For a moment, she thought she might crumble, that the pressure would finally crush her. But then she remembered her father's voice again, weak but firm, and she steadied herself with a long, quiet breath. She had no idea that someone else was watching too closely to ignore. Ethan's gaze hadn't shifted, his attention fixed on her with growing curiosity. At the counter, the manager, a narrow-faced man named Mr. Reed, gave her a glare sharp enough to pierce glass. "You're moving too slow, Hayes. Table 3's been waiting on their risotto for 10 minutes. This isn't a diner, these people expect efficiency." "I'll bring it now," Clara said quickly. "See that you do. And smile more. God knows you're not here for your charm, but at least don't look like someone dragged you in from the street." His words stung harder than she wanted to admit. She had smiled when she'd first taken this job, grateful just to have it. But the longer she stayed, the more she realized the uniform wasn't just black and white cloth, it was a costume meant to hide a person entirely. As the sun poured through the glass ceiling, the room filled with laughter from a cluster of wealthy socialites near the center. They sipped champagne though it was barely noon, their silk dresses glittering like jewels. Clara approached with a tray of oysters, careful with every step. One of the women wrinkled her nose when Clara set the plate down. "Her hands," she whispered loudly enough for Clara to hear. "So rough. Can you imagine those hands touching your food?" Another chimed in, "Probably works double shifts at greasy diners. No wonder she looks exhausted. Poor thing doesn't belong here." The women laughed, not cruel in volume, but cruel in intention. Their eyes flicked over Clara as if she were a stain they had chosen to notice only to feel superior. Clara forced her lips into a polite smile, the kind that burned at the corners. "Anything else I can bring you?" she asked softly. "Yes," one of them said, smirking. "Confidence. But I suppose that's not on the menu." Their laughter echoed as Clara walked away, her tray trembling just slightly. Near the bar, she found Marco, another server, leaning against the counter scrolling his phone. He grinned at her. "First week still killing you?" Clara gave him a small nod. "Something like that." He shrugged. "Don't take it personal. They look down on everyone. Still, you really gotta toughen up. Around here, if they smell weakness, they'll eat you alive." Clara wanted to laugh at the irony. If only they knew. If only they had seen her life before this. Weakness wasn't a stranger, it was the air she had breathed every day since her father's heart attack 3 years ago. Her father had been a construction worker, the kind of man who came home each night with dust in his hair and stories on his tongue. He had raised her alone after her mother walked out when Clara was 12. She still remembered the sound of his laughter in the kitchen, rough and unpolished, but warm enough to make the smallest apartment feel like home. When he died, Clara had been 21 and suddenly responsible for everything: the rent, the medical bills, the promises he'd made to people he couldn't keep. She had dreams once, to study psychology, maybe even help people the way she had always wanted. But dreams didn't pay debts. Dreams didn't keep the lights on. So she folded them away. She worked nights at diners, mornings at bakeries, and finally found her way here to the atrium. The money wasn't much, but the tips could keep her afloat, barely. She never told anyone that every paycheck went straight to caring for her younger brother, Michael, now 16, whose asthma made it hard for him to work at all. She never told anyone that she skipped meals so he wouldn't have to. She carried all of it quietly, like invisible plates stacked higher than any tray in her hands. "Hayes!" Mr. Reed's bark snapped her out of memory. "Stop daydreaming and serve table 12. Do you think you're here for charity?" Clara rushed over, clutching her tray. At table 12 sat Ethan Ward, though Clara didn't know his name yet. To her, he was just another sharply dressed customer, mid-30s perhaps, quiet, with an aura that made the other staff step lightly. He wore no flashy jewelry, but the way people glanced at him, then quickly looked away, told her enough. She approached carefully. "Good afternoon, sir. May I take your order?" His eyes lifted to her face for the first time. Unlike the others, he didn't look through her. He looked at her. "Coffee," he said simply. His voice was steady, thoughtful. "Black." Clara nodded and turned, but felt the weight of his gaze following her. She didn't know why, but it made her straighten her shoulders a little. The hours dragged. Customers complained about food that was too warm or too cold. A man snapped his fingers in her face when she didn't notice him quickly enough. Reed scolded her again for being too meek. By the time the clock struck noon, Clara's spirit felt worn thin. And then it happened. The glass doors swung open, and sunlight from the street spilled into the restaurant. 3 figures strode in, men in hoodies, faces covered with cheap masks. The first held a pistol raised high, the metallic gleam catching the light. "Everyone down," he shouted. His voice cut across the dining room like a blade. Gasps and screams erupted. Chairs scraped back, glasses shattered on the floor. Customers dove under tables, clutching handbags, clutching themselves. The jazz music sputtered to a halt. Clara froze for a moment, the tray in her hands tilting until a glass slid and smashed against the floor. Her heart pounded, but her face, strangely, did not break into panic. Her eyes flicked across the room, assessing faster than thought. 2 children, no older than 7, were crying near the edge of a booth, abandoned by the nanny who had ducked beneath the table. Clara's feet moved before her brain caught up. She crouched, pulling them gently toward her, shielding them with her own body. "Shoo," she whispered. "Close your eyes. You're safe. I won't let anything happen." The robber nearest them swung his pistol around. "You! Stand up!" Gasps rippled across the room. Reed, from behind the counter, shouted, "Clara, for God's sake, just do what he says." Clara rose slowly, her hands visible, her body still angled between the gun and the children. Her breath was steady, almost unnaturally calm. She met the robber's eyes through the mask. She didn't speak, but she didn't flinch either. From the corner table, Ethan Ward leaned forward. His hand rested against his glass, but his eyes were locked on the young waitress who, against every instinct of survival, had chosen not to cower but to protect. The man sneered at her silence, shoving the gun closer to her face. "What are you, deaf? Get over there. Move." Behind him, one of the customers whimpered, the sound of pearls clinking to the floor. Another whispered harshly, "Why isn't she scared? She's going to get us all killed." Clara didn't break eye contact. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but she forced her breath to remain even, like she had taught herself years ago when the world had first gone dark after her mother died. Panic never solved anything. She had learned that the hard way, watching her father crumble into grief, and later, when bills piled high and college was ripped from her grasp. Life had trained her for moments like this, not classrooms. "Answer me," the robber barked, pressing the muzzle to her forehead. Clara finally spoke, her voice level, almost gentle. "I'm not moving until the children are safe." The room froze. The child beneath the table let out a tiny hiccuping sob. The robber's arm twitched with irritation. "You think you get to negotiate with me? You're nothing but a waitress." The word sliced through her, and somewhere behind her she heard soft laughter, a nervous, mocking release from one of the terrified customers. As if even now, in the face of violence, they couldn't resist sneering at her place in life. She stood taller, though her knees trembled beneath her uniform. "I may be just a waitress," she said quietly, "but tonight I'm the only one standing between you and shooting a child. So if you want to hurt someone, hurt me." The robber hesitated, the barrel of his gun pressing harder against her skin. For a heartbeat, the restaurant was silent but for shallow, terrified breaths. From the corner table, Ethan Ward's eyes never left her. Unlike the others, he wasn't watching in fear, he was studying her. He noted the stillness in her shoulders, the steady rhythm of her voice, the strange strength in a woman everyone else had dismissed as invisible. The second robber near the door cursed as distant sirens began wailing, faint but growing louder. "We don't have time, let's go," he shouted. The one facing Clara spat, his grip trembling between fury and indecision. Then, with a sharp shove, he pushed her aside. Clara stumbled back but didn't fall. He backed toward the door, gun still sweeping the room. "This isn't over," he snarled before both men bolted, vanishing into the daylight street beyond the shattered glass. For several long seconds, silence hung heavy in the ruined restaurant. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the sound of a child crying broke the spell, and suddenly there was a rush of voices, of chairs scraping, of people clambering out of hiding. Clara dropped to her knees beside the children, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. "You're safe. It's over," she whispered, hugging them tightly as they buried their faces against her. But instead of gratitude, whispers began to ripple among the wealthy diners. "She almost got us killed. She provoked him, did you hear that? Ridiculous, playing the hero for attention." Reed stormed over, his face flushed with fury. "What were you thinking, Clara? Standing up like that? Talking back? You're a waitress, not some cop." Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. She had no defense, no excuse that would matter to men like him. She had only done what she believed was right. And then Ethan Ward stood. The murmur of voices died instantly. All eyes turned to him, the billionaire recluse, the man of myth more than flesh, who had watched everything in silence until now. He walked slowly across the wreckage-strewn floor, his polished shoes crunching on broken glass. His gaze was fixed only on Clara. Reed shifted nervously, trying to recover his authority. "Mr. Ward, I deeply apologize for that." "Be quiet," Ethan said, his voice calm but commanding. Reed's mouth snapped shut. Ethan stopped directly in front of Clara, who still knelt among the children, her uniform stained, her hands shaking. He extended his hand. For a moment, Clara simply stared at it, uncomprehending. Then, slowly, she took it, and he helped her to her feet. He turned to read, to the stunned diners, to the room that had mocked her, belittled her, erased her humanity all afternoon. His voice carried like steel. If you ever speak to her like that again, you'll be begging for a job on the street. In fact, he let the words hang a beat, his eyes narrowing. Consider yourself unemployed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reed's face drained of color. What? You can't. I can, Ethan cut him off. Because as of right now, I own this restaurant. The room erupted in shock. Patrons whispered, eyes darting between the billionaire and the waitress. Ethan turned back to Clara, his tone softening only for her. You don't belong clearing tables, Clara Hayes. What I saw today, he paused, searching her expression. Calm under fire like that, it's rarer than genius. It's the kind of strength you can't buy or teach. Clara blinked at him, stunned, her throat too tight for words. I want you on my team, Ethan continued. Director of Crisis Response for my foundation. We need people who don't break under pressure. People like you. The words landed like thunder. A waitress, invisible hours ago, mocked and dismissed, now being offered a role that would place her beside one of the world's most powerful men. Around them, the elite murmured in disbelief. A woman in diamonds hissed, her. She doesn't even belong here. Ethan's gaze flicked toward her, sharp and dismissive. She belongs more than any of you. When you were screaming, she was protecting you. Clara's hands shook as she pressed them against her apron. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ethan replied simply. Tears pricked her eyes, not of fear this time, but of release. The years of exhaustion, of humiliation, of being invisible, seemed to crack open all at once. For the first time, someone had seen her, truly seen her. Yes, she whispered. Ethan gave a small nod, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. He turned to the crowd. Remember this moment. When the world asks why I chose her, tell them the truth, courage has no uniform. Within hours, the story would explode across every headline. Billionaire appoints waitress who stayed calm in robbery to lead his global security team. Clara didn't seek the cameras or the applause. That night, she walked home beneath the fading sun, the city buzzing around her, her heart still unsteady. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt chosen. And though she had no idea what challenges lay ahead, one truth burned steady within her: she had faced the worst of fear and had not broken. And that, somehow, had changed everything. And that was the story of how a simple waitress's calm courage changed everything in the blink of an eye. What do you think would have happened if she hadn't stepped forward that day? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from.